Hi, I'm Rebecca Gardner. I'm a clinician, I'm an educator, and I'm a faculty member in the Division of General Internal Medicine. I also sit on the Department of Medicine's promotion committee.
Hello, I'm Fred Schiffman. I'm Vice Chair of Medicine at Brown, Associate Physician in Chief at Miriam, one of the program directors, and I am also a hematologist oncologist.
I think this is the most important element of this entire process, and that's keeping your CV up to date. It's hard, and it took me many years to figure out a system that worked for me. So I can share what works for me, and I'm curious to hear what you do. So for me, anytime there's something that I think might even have a possibility of being included on my CV, I will send an email to myself. I'll either forward what I have been invited to do, or a paper maybe that's been published, or I'll jot a quick email to myself. And then when that email comes in, I'll put it in a folder that's labeled pending CV. And then I forget about it until I see that there's an appointment on my calendar that I have created for myself, maybe a half an hour. I'll look through that folder, and anything that seems like it might be worth putting on the CV, I'll take that time to put it on the CV. Otherwise, I generally won't remember until it's time to meet with my division director once a year, and I don't want to be scrambling then to try to remember everything I did over the prior year.
I think that's a terrific system. I used to make notes for myself on Post-its or pieces of paper, which would inevitably get lost or destroyed. I've started using the system that Rebecca is talking about. The subject is CV update. I don't put it in a folder, but I have it in my emails. And when I need to meet with my division director or I'm redoing my CV for another reason, I do a search for CV update and get those important pieces of information.
I don't think there's really much that's too small or insignificant to put on your CV. I mean, I probably wouldn't put your high school accomplishments on there, and I'd be really careful when thinking about things that happened in college, unless it's a publication, which could definitely go on there. I probably would avoid putting hobbies, but certainly community service or volunteering could go on there.
I agree once again with Rebecca. However, I think that my way of doing it would be to consider what my mission and goals are professionally and in life. And I would use that as a framework, a scaffolding to decide what goes in and what shouldn't go in. I would disagree a little bit about hobbies. If you are an accomplished skier, surfer, musician, prize winning, or even if you think you're good yourself, if the CV is being used as you're applying for a job, it's a nice talking point that may come out of it. But, in terms of being in charge of the high school glee club or, on the college soccer team, I probably would leave that off, as Rebecca suggests.
One thing that people might want to do is look at the CVs of their colleagues, especially people who have a similar job to them or who are at a similar level or maybe a few years ahead. I guarantee there is stuff on there that we didn't think of that your colleague remembered and put on there that you yourself are doing as well. And you can absolutely add that to your CV.
Yeah, I think that's really important, if not critical. And also, before you finalize that CV and send it in or move it along, I think having somebody, a colleague on the promotions committee, a more senior person, somebody who's mentoring you, review the CV to make sure there are no omissions or commissions of errors.
Something that Fred has taught me is to make sure whenever you're turning your CV in for a particular purpose is to make sure that have reacquainted yourself with everything on there, because you should be expecting that anyone could ask you about anything that's on there at any given time. So if something feels a little musty or cobwebby, it'd probably be good to pull that out and either remove it from your CV, but better yet, to reacquaint yourself with the project so that you're able to talk about it if someone asks you.
Yep, well said. You've taken my thoughts and put them into words, as usual, Rebecca.
I think a lot of faculty in our department update it once a year when they're about to meet with their division director for their annual review. That's probably not frequently enough. For someone who's really academically active, they may be updating it once a month. For most of us, that's probably pretty frequent and they don't need to do it that often. For myself, I set a half an hour in my calendar. I create an appointment for myself every few months, and maybe there's stuff to add and maybe there isn't, but at least I've taken an opportunity to clear out that pending CV folder in my email inbox. There is a lot that we're doing that folks are not putting on their CVs. And the point of a CV is to really capture all the amazing, interesting, and diverse activities that you spend your day doing. So, one place to start would be to think about your professional societies that you're involved with. Are you on a committee? Do you review abstracts for the national meeting? There's a lot of things there that folks probably are doing that they're not putting on their CV. I would next think about your teaching activities in the clinical realm. By the nature of being a clinician educator, chances are you're having learners of multiple levels with you when you do your clinical work, including every single one of those folks and adding information about how many there are, what level of learner, and how frequently they're with you is something important to make sure that detail is on your CV.
And if you've created novel teaching activities during your attending rounds time, if there's something interesting you're doing, working in a mini journal club into your attending rounds, put that down as an innovation. Take credit for what you've done creatively and novelly.
That's a great point. I think a lot of times faculty are developing curricula and then not putting that on their CV because there's not an obvious place to put it. But that's the bread and butter of what we do as clinician educators, and it should absolutely be on there. And then think about presentations or lectures you've done for any level of learner. Maybe you go to the medical school in the first 2 years and lecture to the medical students. Maybe you have a conference for the fellows that you provide didactic education on. Maybe you do a noon conference for the residents. There's a lot of presentations we do that aren't grand rounds presentations that are still meaningful and count. Mentoring and advising is a big one for clinician educators. We do this formally or informally. Fred, you do a ton of advising and mentoring, but we all probably do some degree of mentoring and advising, whether that's maybe we're assigned someone by the residency program, maybe we meet with medical students regularly or fellows. All of that should be on our CVs as well. That's really important work that we do that does take time. Other activities to think about for clinician educators are abstracts that we present at conferences. It can be local things here at Brown, maybe the Department of Medicine Research Day or a conference at the medical school, or it can be things at the regional or national level. And including those is really important. If you have a particular niche or a area that you are developing as your area of expertise, you may want to actually pull that out and list all the activities related to that to highlight that this is your area and that it's something that you are an expert at. You've done additional structured training in areas like curriculum development or anti-racism activities or anything where you've attended a longitudinal course, that absolutely can go on your CV as well. It demonstrates a commitment to ongoing faculty development, which is really important.
I fully agree with that. And Rebecca's going to introduce the subject of digital and podcast kinds of scholarship, which I think are valued and count.
And these traditionally have not had a place on our Brown template, but you can absolutely add these activities to your CV, and you should. So if you're doing these activities, create a new category. It can be called scholarly work in other media. It can be called digital scholarship. It can be called non-traditional scholarship. It can be called community engagement. You can make up the title as best fits your work at that time. And then as you add new things to that category, feel free to change up the title to reflect what's in there.
And scholarship is now broadly and newly defined to include not just publication in print or in cyberspace. It's any activity, any novel program or project that you have thought about and operationalized that is presented to your peers, to your colleagues, for criticism, for feedback and advice. So scholarship doesn't have the traditional definition as with digital media or podcasts. People who create information and generate new knowledge and put it up for review can consider themselves scholars. And it should be documented.
And folks, if they're into this, they can even include metrics on their CV that demonstrate the reach of these activities. So if it's a tutorial, you can include things about engagement and number of views. If it's a podcast, you can talk about the number of downloads. It really can demonstrate to folks reviewing your CV who may be less familiar what the reach of that activity is. And the reach can be much broader than a typical journal article or grand rounds presentation. Brown Vivo is the university's online faculty profile site. It is not just for researchers, it's for all faculty. And it turns out that if you do a Google search of your name, it's the top response most of the time, or at least in the top 3. So when your patients Google you, or your colleagues, or a future employer, or anyone who might want to be reaching out to collaborate with you, that's going to be the top thing they see. And I would say it's pretty rare on the internet to have control over anything that comes up on a Google search. And this is one area where you actually have complete control. So it's kind of a missed opportunity if there's nothing on your page. The default is a blank page. I think it's worth, again, finding 30 minutes to create an appointment with yourself on your calendar. You don't have to spend the whole 30 minutes, but do a couple of things. Put a photo on there. Doesn't have to be a professional headshot. Could be any photo. And then put a few things that you find interesting about the work that you do. It can be your clinical interests. It could be your research interests if you have those. It can be the education work you do or the learners you work with. I mean, honestly, you could list the opening day lineup of the Red Sox, and that's better than nothing. It does say something about you.
If you're interviewing for a job and you've polished your CV, well, the first information your interviewer or that committee may have about you is your Brown Vivo page. So it's a colorful, literally and figuratively, introduction to who you are and what you like to do.
Anyone on the faculty at Brown gets a Brown Vivo page. Your login is your Brown credentials. You can go in there and update it at any time. You can ask your administrator or secretary, if you're lucky enough to have one of those, to help you keep it updated. They can log in as well and update it for you as you see fit. But I definitely don't want folks to think that this has to be something amazing. This is definitely a situation where you don't want perfect to be the enemy of good enough. You have total control. The only thing that's pre-populated is your name, your professorial rank, and where you went to medical school and undergrad. Everything else is completely blank, and you can add whatever you think is important. There are internet tutorials that administrators of the Vivo page have created, and we can include links to those. I did want to mention the perspective of the promotions committee, because the CV serves a lot of different purposes, but certainly one purpose is for when people go up for promotion. They want the CV to serve them best. So we wanted to share a few things about what the promotions committee is looking for. One of the most important things they're looking for is that your CV is well organized, consistent, formatted, using the same fonts and indents and underlines throughout, and that it sticks to the Brown template. Another key tip that the promotions committee would like you to know is that when you use acronyms, think about someone who is not local and maybe not even in your field reviewing your CV. Are they going to know what you're talking about? It's best to spell those acronyms out at least once. It's also helpful for when you do go up for promotion to have your presentations separated out by local, regional, national, and to have your publications grouped by type so that folks can very easily see what you've been up to. If you have grants, include all the information on the Brown template so that folks have a sense of what your role was on the project and the scope of the work.
And for publications, be prepared to explain, defend what role you had in preparing that paper or acquiring that grant and what your ongoing role has been.
That's a great point. And one way to help reviewers looking at your CV understand is to bold your name in the publication. And if you work with trainees frequently and they're often on your papers, maybe indicate that with an asterisk or some way to show that you're working with a trainee and mentoring someone on the project. I would say it's also okay to annotate things on your CV. Maybe you have a major role or something that's particularly important to you, but it's not clear for someone looking quickly at your CV that this is a big part of your job. It's okay to add a little description there to help people understand that.
Maybe put it in italics and have an asterisk that will help direct you to that special part of your job.
And the other thing is that it's okay to be strategic about where to put things. So, Fred, for example, let's say you're a researcher and you've developed a curriculum on lab testing in the hospital. Well, you might look at your own CV and think, I'm a little bit thin in the education realm. And you're going to put that curriculum under an education-related category. But let's say you're a clinician educator and you do a ton of teaching. You might put that same curriculum under scholarship. to highlight that this is something scholarly that you've done. You have discretion about where you can put your activities, and you can be strategic about how you decide to categorize them.
That's a great idea.
If you have any questions about your CV as relates to promotion, the promotions committee chair is always happy to meet with you to give you feedback, even a year or two out.
Let me just add, the promotions committee chair, your division director, and your department chair, who will be defending you and promoting your promotion, keep a frequent dialogue, an ongoing dialogue with them, so there are no surprises when they finally do see your CV as it's ready to serve you for your promotion event.
Fred, there are 3 key takeaways that I want anyone watching this to remember. Number 1, it's important to develop a system that works for you. My system might work for you, Fred's system might work for you, but you may have to develop your own system. And that system should do 2 things. It should allow you to collect your activities as you go throughout the year, and it should allow you time to update your CV regularly as is appropriate for you. For me, that's the email folder that has pending activities. For other people, it could be a list or a physical folder on their desk. The second takeaway is to look at other people's CVs, see what's in there, see what you can steal because you're doing that activity as well. It's probably most helpful if they have a similar job to you, but it's going to be helpful kind of regardless. And then to have someone review your CV who knows your work and can remind you of all the things you're doing that's not on there. And then the third key takeaway is to use the Brown template and add categories that reflect your work. These templates were developed with researchers in mind and not clinician educators, so they often don't capture the breadth of interesting activities that we're doing every day. It's completely fine and in fact encouraged to add categories to reflect the important work that we do.
I think that's perfect, Rebecca. I would emphasize having a more senior colleague review it and also consider the addition of a personal statement. Who are you? What do you want to do? What is your professional outlook and what are your goals? And that can amend the CV. It can crystallize some of the important information in it, and it serves as talking points if you are interviewed.
For anyone who wants to take a look at the Brown template, we will include a link to the Biomed website below so you can take a look at what the Brown template looks like and what teaching activities on the CV might look like as well. Good luck to everyone as you update your CVs. Go and find that half hour on your calendar right now to create your own new system. And if you have any questions or would like someone to review your CV, Fred and I are always happy to do that.